I'm going to go to Martin now. Martin Walshe is Senior Infrastructure Advisor at the Department of International Development and Infrastructure Advisor for DFID's program in Afghanistan. He's also the lead on, he's going to set out experiences in construction from the results from the construction sector transparency initiative. And again, there's a very, very long list of experience here, which I won't completely go into, if that's okay, Martin. Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks also for quoting from the World Development Report, because that's something I meant to do, but I got rather distracted before this event, and so never picked anything up. But I think that's very important and very useful that we've got that report there. I'm going to talk about the Construction Sector Transparency Initiative. I'll tell you a little bit about the pilot. There's going to, I believe there's some bits and pieces of paper and stuff which will be available afterwards, so I don't want to talk too much about the initiative itself, but I want to talk about some of the experiences that I have had working in Afghanistan and bringing some a few anecdotes from Ethiopia, just to put cost, construction transparency into some kind of context, because I think you will find the theme through what I'm trying to say is that this transparency initiative is not about corruption on its own. It's about corruption and it's about capacity, because I think the two are really quite closely intertwined. DFID held a forum back in 2007 with a load of participants from something like 20 different countries to look at the issue of construction transparency and the development of a construction transparency initiative, given the acronym COST. And we took these forward into a pilot program, which we ran in 8 countries and headed up, I hope I can get this thing to work. Yes. Headed up by an international secretariat providing oversight and technical support to the countries. Now, why do we want COST? And why has DFID been supporting the initiative? I think it's important, easy to recognise public sector infrastructure, properly managed, properly developed, makes a huge contribution to economic growth and poverty reduction. And most infrastructure, almost all infrastructure, is done through public sector procurement and public sector financing. There's billions of dollars of public money being spent, often in terms of long-term loans, often in the term of grant money and your tax money. Mismanagement in design, in project management, corruption in implementation, undermine all of the benefits that are available through improved infrastructure provision. An example from Tanzania suggests that the construction process, the construction industry, contributes something like $600 million to the GDP of Tanzania. And estimates in Tanzania suggest that between 10 and 15% of all construction contracts are lost to corruption. Something more than $60 million a year. And I would suggest that that is probably only a small proportion of what is also being lost through poor engineering design, poor engineering and contract management and implementation. And the impacts of all of this are often felt by the poor, because they're the ones who are most reliant on the provision of improved services. It's very interesting that the G20 process, led by Korea and South Africa to the Korea Summit last year, produced an infrastructure initiative, and within that infrastructure initiative there is a commitment to work with existing pilots to develop an initiative ready for implementation to significantly improve transparency in procurement, construction and infrastructure finance. This is something which interesting you mentioned Bob Zelek and the World Bank, because Bob Zelek has cottoned on to what we're trying to do with COST. The World Bank has been a very strong partner with DFID throughout COST, and Bob Zelek has become a champion for what the Construction Transparency Initiative is trying to do. Thank you. COST is an international and multi-stakeholder initiative looking to improve transparency and accountability in publicly funded construction contracts. And the core concept is really what you get what you pay for. And that applies equally to national governments as well as the affected stakeholders in the wider public. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly. There's lots of words up on the screen which you can read, and no doubt you'll find afterwards. What have we achieved in the cost pilot? We worked in 8 pilot countries. In each of those, we have found a political person who is prepared to champion the concept of cost. We have been able, through that process, to put in place sustainable, competent, multi-stakeholder groups in all pilot countries who are there to represent the interests of all in transparency and accountability of construction. The process has looked at a number of departments, procuring entities who are managing infrastructure projects, and tried to look at how you trace the development of a project from concept through to completion, and what information is available and should be disclosed to demonstrate how costs through that process have changed. And through that process of transparency and accountability, it's possible to identify issues around anomalies in project development, project procurement, and project implementation. We've looked at something like over 200 projects in the 8 countries, something like 29 procuring entities. We've had a number of achievements, including in Ethiopia, the introduction of a new public procurement directive, although I'm not sure whether that's actually passed into law yet. The 213 projects in the 29 procuring entities identified a number of anomalies. We looked at projects in a range of industry subsectors, and the outcome and what we've learned is that mismanagement and inefficiency, and I emphasize the mismanagement and inefficiency, is evident throughout the project cycle. Issues around time overruns, cost overruns, and so on are evident or have been evident in many cases without any legitimate reason whatsoever, which suggests there may have been something untoward going on perhaps. And in many of the cases that we've looked at, there has been further investigation initiated, which I guess is a good result, a good outcome. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about some of the cost principles and how they might and can apply in conflict and fragile states. I'm a practicing engineer. I've worked for years in construction and construction-related work, and I'm in DFID, and I'm perhaps now a bit more further removed from it, but I nevertheless have a lifetime of experience in construction. I'd like to illustrate how I have tried to apply cost in some very difficult environments, and where the problems that were faced are as much or more related to wastage as a result of procurement and engineering management capacity as they are to corruption. I've most recently been working in DFID's infrastructure program in Afghanistan. Unusually for DFID, we're involved really at the front line of infrastructure development. We've got a very coherent program of direct support for infrastructure to improve opportunities for agricultural production in Helmand province. We're looking at water resources, irrigation, roads, electricity, all around improving agricultural productivity and ability to move products to market. And we're also looking at value added on agriculture through development of an agricultural business park. And we're doing that in a conflict-torn province, which has been, in the past, the breadbasket of Afghanistan. The irrigation systems in Afghanistan, in Helmand, are extensive and impressive. They're massive. They're wonderful pieces of engineering dating back to the 1960s, mostly developed with American money. But they're in need of massive rehabilitation, and the call for irrigation improvements is something we hear constantly from the local populace, particularly when the armed forces move into an area, stabilize the area, and there is opportunity for further development. And the US Marines in particular arrive in these areas with massive amounts of money for stabilization projects, which most of which can be spent at the discretion of the local commander. And most of the local commanders are soldiers. They're not procurement people. And it's been a real challenge for us in DFID and the donor community, the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Helmand, to try to align the massive spending power of the military with the development efforts in the Provincial Reconstruction Team. We're starting to do it, but there's a whole raft of challenges. And I'll just illustrate the issue of national or capacity to design and undertake the rehabilitation works, because the normal practice of the military when they arrive and they're ready to do some stabilization work is to give money to someone, an entrepreneurial company or a company who purports to be knowledgeable to deliver a project. And one or two companies in particular are very good at this, in going in and saying, we are the experts in irrigation system, canal rehabilitation. There's a problem here. Give us $1 million or $800,000. We'll go and fix it. And generally what's happened is that the money's been handed over. The organisation has subcontracted the work to the lowest possible bidder, has delivered what you see on the screen, which is really the most appalling piece of work. Bad workmanship, poorly designed, badly implemented. It's not going to do anything except fall down again, and the problem will perpetuate. There's no mechanism available to account for how that money is being spent. So really what's happening, most of that money is being siphoned off. The local population who are wanting to see benefit, see no benefit from the coalition effort, and the result is propaganda for the Taliban to use against the coalition forces, which undermines stabilization and the effort that we're trying to do. And we've been able, through a period of time, to work with the local military commanders to bring a much clearer approach to design, proper procurement, bidding for work, proper construction, supervision and accountability. And it's starting slowly to deliver projects which work and which the local population really quite appreciate. And we're moving forward with a win for hearts and minds. It's a very sort of naff phrase, but it's actually a very significant element of how things move forward in stabilisation in Helmand. In the road sector in Helmand, we've been working with the British Royal Engineers and with the provincial road ministries on procurement and construction management of roads. We, DFID, have introduced cost measures of keeping and having available for disclosure material project information on the development of a project, its initial design estimate, its cost through tender, through construction to completion. And we're pushing that approach into the local ministries. Yes, I can finish. As part of a capacity development process, because they do not have the capacity, they still are working from different principles. So we're trying to push the process of cost in there. Again, this is an issue of as much of capacity as it is of corruption. Finally, two anecdotes from Ethiopia. Ethiopia was one of the cost pilot countries. At the cost disclosure event, the head of the Ethiopian Federal Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, in response to a question from the floor, said that, in his opinion, around 90% of the cost wastage in road construction in Ethiopia was down to poor engineering and contract management, and 10% was down to corruption. I have a colleague who's been working in the Ethiopian Roads Authority, and he's told me that it's not uncommon for young, relatively inexperienced engineers to be put in charge of big road projects, 10 or more major road projects under one inexperienced engineer, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not only does this poor chap have to deal with differing reporting requirements from all the different donors funding the work. And there's many, the World Bank, African Development Bank, European Commission, Arab banks, Chinese, you name it. And this poor chap is trying to keep all those donors happy with the spend. At the same time, he's dealing with some very smart and savvy road construction contractors. An offer by a contractor to provide an alternative design solution at no additional cost can have many hidden traps and indirect related costs. That happens. Inexperience, lack of technical support and capacity in the Roads Authority has resulted in unnecessary costs amounting in one case to $50 million. So cost, construction transparency, has a major role to play across the whole spectrum of construction in identifying and proposing necessary technical, commercial knowledge and capacity for projects to be delivered, as well as in, through greater transparent accountability, reducing the opportunity for corruption. Sorry, that's my rant. DFID are incredibly proud of what the cost pilot has achieved to date. The cost approach around procurement disclosure and multi-stakeholder approaches has shown to be technically viable in government systems and across all the construction subsectors. All those in cost believe that it has the potential to transform the global construction industry. We have the support of most of the multilateral and bilateral donors, as well as endorsement from many international private sector construction companies, other private sector organisations, and by prominent civil society organisations. Planning for a global expansion of cost is well underway, led by the World Bank, with support from DFID, and fantastic support from the very hard working members of the Cost International Secretariat, some of whom are here. Thank you very much indeed.
Martin, thanks. Really fascinating. And just to pick up on this kind of results theme,
Yeah.
have you put a figure on how much money this is saving, if you like? I mean, you're talking about huge amounts of money, one way or another.
I don't think we're in a position to measure that. No, not yet.
Okay.
I'd love to be able to.
Interesting question, isn't it?
It is. But I mean, I think